Hello, PAX Online audience! Welcome to the infinite storytelling engine of professional wrestling. We're so happy to have you here. Introducing our beautiful panel of experts. Go ahead and introduce yourselves. I want to know your name, if you are a face or a heel, and what your entrance music is.
I'm Matt Cross. I am a face, I believe, though I can be a heel as well, and I come out to Kings of the Cleveland Streets by the American Werewolves.
Cool. Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm lead game designer at ArenaNet in Seattle. I think I would make a good babyface, but probably most people would think I would be a heel. Some tank girl type of thing.
I'm Anthony DiMento. I'm the lead player investment designer at Sony Santa Monica. I can work as a face, but I'm best suited as a heel, like most of my favorite wrestlers. And I'll probably just steal Kevin Owens' entrance music if given the choice.
Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm a senior writer at Monolith. So in my soul, I feel like I'm a heel, but I feel like most people would think I'm a face. And I think I would come out to something really classy, like a Tchaikovsky or something.
Oh my god, I want to see that badly.
Yeah, I can do some ballet moves on the way out. I'll be a ballerina wrestler. Okay.
Oh yes, done.
I'm Rob Giusti. I'm a game developer, currently independent, and I would be a heel. I would be a mean ol' heel, and I think I would come out to I think my entrance music would be something by The Prodigy.
Excellent. My name is Andrew Witts. I'm the lead multiplayer designer at 343 Industries. I am a heel, and I think I'd come out to The Final Countdown by Europe.
Yes,
Okay.
You'd remember. You remember.
And me, the disembodied voice. My name is Rachel Leiker. I am the lead creative designer at Hardsuit Labs. I am absolutely a heel, as you all will come to realize. And if I got the chance to come out to anything, it would be Set Guitars to Kill from And So I Watch You From Afar.
Ooh.
Right. Getting into the panel, the biggest question I think everybody has is, hey, isn't professional wrestling fake?
Whoa.
Mr. Matt Cross, how do you respond?
Yes. See you later. That's the most common question. Wrestling is sort of like a live action stunt show that unfolds real time in front of your very eyes with real consequences. So it's fake in the same way every book you've ever read, every movie you've ever seen, every game you've ever played, every story you've been told is fake. So it's not a right word that would be used for it. If I go to see the ballet, a friend wouldn't ask me like, "Well, you know it's fake, right?" So it's a lot more athletic and real in any sense that you want to put it, because a lot of times we're in there, though we may have talked ahead of time, there are giant swaths of the matches where we haven't talked about anything, and it is sort of unfolding again real time based on sort of audience feedback as well. So I think that's one of the very unique things about wrestling, is that the audience is involved, and if they yell out a certain thing, it will impact and influence what we do. So there's this interplay between the audience and people real time that I think it's very unique.
It's the best part.
I agree.
That's the best part.
That's a really good answer. Thank you.
Of course.
All right, so we've talked about how it is a performance and how it is kind of partially planned and partially on the fly. So why don't we talk a little bit about the DNA of a wrestling match? Matt, do you mind walking us through this a little bit more?
Sure. So this is like sort of the general classic outline, if you will, of a match and the story within. Generally, you have a good guy and a bad guy, a heel and a face facing off against one another. The babyface in this beginning part of the match will do what is called the shine. So in the beginning 30 seconds, minute, 2 minutes, they will attempt to impress upon the audience whatever it is that they do. So whether they're a powerful wrestler or an agile wrestler or an innovative wrestler or fast or strong or whatever it is that they do, this will be that period where they do that thing. So the audience can be like, oh, this guy is fast, this guy is strong, this guy is whatever. You hope to do enough that they'll remember it later on. Now, generally, the babyface will out-wrestle the heel, who then gets frustrated, and he will often cheat or do something to then cut off the babyface. So whether it's behind the referee's back, poke in the eyes, or something like this, or something to display that frustration that he's experiencing, and he's sick of getting, up to this point, sort of beat up by the good guy. So he'll cut off the good guy, and that brings us to the heat. Now, the heat is the section where the bad guy is just imposing his will on the good guy. He's just beating him up. It's relentless. It's that period where, like, oh, our hero is in danger. Like, he's never going to be able to overcome this. He's against impossible odds. He's so beat up. But the babyface during this period will never die, right? He's always coming back. He's always showing he's alive. But the second you just lay down flat, you're going to lose sort of audience engagement. So even though you may be getting the crap kicked out of you, you're sort of still crawling and fighting, and then eventually, perhaps you're able to avoid the heel as he comes at you, or capitalize on some mistake he makes, or muster up enough courage, or that audience gets behind you where you feel it and you're like, here's my chance, here's my time. Now I can kind of block a shot finally, and we can sort of build something here and mount this comeback. So it's the big heroic, like, you've overcome everything, you finally got out of the way of one catastrophic move, now you're capitalizing on this opportunity that's come to you, and this is purely fueled by adrenaline, right? So now you don't feel anything, you can't be hurt, even though you may have gotten your butt kicked before this and up to this point. Now it's just, you're firing on all cylinders, it's all you, and you're coming back strong. So this is the comeback, and really gets the audience involved. You don't feel the pain of what has come before. That will lead you into trying to win. So now you're trying to get a pinfall on your opponent or a submission. He's trying to do the same to you. You guys are both tired and weathered, and you've been through so much in front of everyone's eyes, and they've seen you, overcome all these odds real time, leading up into the finish, which will depend on where you're going at a later time. So if this is the end of a feud, perhaps, and you want to leave people going home in the main event happy, then the babyface will prevail. If the following month they're going to overcome more odds or face another challenge, then perhaps the heel wins again, and perhaps in a nefarious way and in some cheating methods. So that is sort of the general outline that almost all matches follow.
That's an excellent outline. That was excellent.
Great. That's very good, yes. Thank you for that detailed explanation. That sounds curiously familiar to me to a typical narrative structure. Samantha, would you like to explain a little bit more in detail about how these two things line up?
Yeah, so specifically, this maps pretty well to a traditional 5-act structure. So you've got the exposition, which sort of includes the match story and the promos and everything that happens leading up to the match, so that the audience sort of knows what's going on and the feud and the details of it. And then, you've got the cutoff, which is the complication. It propels the actual story that's being told, and it shows the conflict that you're going to see for the rest of the match. The heat ends up being the climax, which is the rising action, the continued, like, oh no, is the face going to be able to turn it around? Things are looking really bad. And then the climax happens. And then you've got the reversal with the aha moment for the hero to beat the enemy, in this case, the face beating the heel. Or, you get the sudden double reversal where the heel ends up winning. And then you have the denouement, which is the outcome of the match, the new rules of the world, or, the feud, the arc, the storyline, whatever. And it just wraps it up completely in one match, while also leaving room for the story to continue. And this is pretty genius for a couple of reasons. First is that the 5-act structure is it works best when it is two very clearly opposing forces and the sort of push-pull struggle between them, wrestling. And the second is that creating a rigid structure for an individual story segment allows for there to be a sense of complete narrative satisfaction within one match, while also sort of contributing to this nebulous, ever-changing, ever-growing storyline. Because, you know, in something like wrestling, you don't entirely know where a story is going to go. Like somebody could retire, somebody could get hurt, something couldn't test well, audience could want to see something different, and the sense of sort of being able to go with the flow is fine because you've already got the structure within each individual match. And I think that that's something that long-running live service games, and in particular MMOs, could really draw on, because MMOs and other live service games are similar in that you don't know exactly how long your story is going to continue. As long as the money comes in, you can keep putting content out, but you don't entirely know how long that's going to happen. It could be 3 years, it could be 5 years, you could be like a 10-year long, 20-year long, whatever game, like WoW. And so you could use, I'm not advocating for a 5-act structure specifically for games. That would be
Everything has to be 5-act structure.
Yeah, prescribing a rigid structure to games is not advisable because every game is different. But picking a structure, whatever you choose, adhering to that for each little story bite and creating a complete story experience for each segment allows players to be satisfied in the moment that their immediate story is resolved while still contributing to this sort of more nebulous, loose story that continues over the years. And that way, if your story suddenly has to end, players are still satisfied. They still had the resolution in that moment. Or if you suddenly find out that your story has to continue much longer than you thought it would, you can keep adding those segments on, and it's not that difficult.
I also think it really helps to structure your game like this or in a similar way as you just described, because it's easier to get into it if you didn't start from the beginning. Like the one thing I love about wrestling is that I can bring a complete newbie at any point in time to an indie show and they will get it. Like there's no like hours and hours of storytelling I need to catch them up on for them to understand what they're seeing. I think that's one of the strengths of wrestling storytelling, that everything is somewhat self-contained and has a deeper narrative if you want to engage with it, but it's kind of optional.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the brilliance of the shine and the cutoff is like, that is so crucial, I find, to like people comprehending a wrestling match that they're watching it for the first time. Is they know nothing. They just see the entrances and they're like, they get like caught up in the spectacle and like the pageantry of it all, of like the start of it. And because that's like, I love that so much. So like maybe it's like they vibe off of my excitement when I bring somebody, but but like but I think like oftentimes when I bring somebody new, like what you're saying, Jenny, and like they're like they don't really know what wrestling is about, I just kind of go, just watch what's going to happen, and then they watch these, go, wait, this person's mad at this person, but why? And I'm just like, because that person's bad. They've articulated that they're bad. They go, but like why? I'm just like, we'll have to find out. Like let's just watch the match, right? The cutoff is go, oh, they're doing this thing. I don't like that. That doesn't seem like it's okay. And it's like, well, now you're in the match, right? Like it's like that now they're invested. And so I think when like Heat and the comeback, like everything works together because the first two communicate things so obviously. And even it could be a lot of nuance in a wrestling match, but just like to somebody from outside who's never experienced it, it's very bombastic and it's very easy to like understand, which is one of my favorite parts.
Andrea has easily brought the most new people into the Seattle wrestling scene than anybody else.
It's very true. It's very true. I love wrestling, so
it's your thing.
The excitement is contagious, definitely.
All right, so we've established that wrestling is entertainment and performance. There's a lot aligned with video games. from a spectator perspective, what are some other crossovers between wrestling and video games? Anthony, I'm going to direct this question at you because I believe you have some very unique perspective on this particular answer.
Yeah, actually, Andrew set me up perfectly, right? Because I think investment in the product and in a particular character is one of the most important things when getting somebody into professional wrestling and getting into a program within the particular show. I think back to when I brought my wife to her very first wrestling match. She knew nothing about it. She always thought I was kind of silly for being such a big wrestling fan. And as people come out and you start to see the characters, she starts to ask similar questions of like, well, who's this? And you explain who they are and you tell them a little bit of their backstory and why they're behaving the way they are. And all of a sudden that investment starts to build, and week after week you learn a little bit more, and the character starts to come together, and all of a sudden, she's asking me if we can, watch wrestling on Monday night, and all my dreams come true. So for me, I think there's a very close parallel with that goal of building investment within the audience. I mean, my title is the lead player investment designer. So we are trying to build investment with our players within the game and within the world that they're going to spend, 10, 20, 30 hours in. So there are a number of tools we use. In the player investment team at Santa Monica, we focus mostly on side content, so things off the critical path. And we also focus on hero progression and how the character can grow over time. So when we're building side content, a lot of the things that we try to do is, focus on secondary characters. So for God of War 2018, it was really important for me to find characters in the game who you're going to learn a little bit about, but use the side content as a way to develop that relationship, not just between Kratos and those characters, but between the player and those characters. And the players who do that content, since it is totally optional, I believe that, by the end of the game, if they're talking about it, they feel more rapport with those characters than someone who didn't. And you can almost wear that as a badge of honor, right? So I do a lot of what Andrew does in LA, where I drag fellow developers who haven't watched wrestling before to our pro wrestling guerrilla shows. And
your LA's Andrew.
And it's funny because we had never met, and he interviewed with us at one point, and people were coming up to me like, "Hey, you would love this guy."
I can see that.
Friends, but yeah, I kind of do the same thing. And even at Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, it's become a place where a lot of the talent has moved on to either NXT or AEW. And as a Pro Wrestling Guerrilla fan, I see those wrestlers on these shows, and I have this investment in them. I know them. These are my guys. And I become one of those smart wrestling fans who I knew about this guy before you. I've been a TV fan since way back in the day. Oh, you're just like a fan of him now. You don't even know about his PWG run. So we try to do similar things with the side content, where people who have played those side quests in God of War, they know Brock and Sindri better than you. Probably people who didn't want to play the content I worked on in 2018, and that's okay too. So I think WWE's done a terrific job of this with establishing NXT as like a core brand, and sometimes using that as a pipeline to their main roster as well, because people are going to have that investment in those characters. Going back, long before a lot of other people. In general, with the side content as well, I think, pacing is always something we're going to consider when we plot out that content. Like, when do you need breaks between the critical path and story to kind of go and do something different? And if you're watching a wrestling show, all of that is going to apply directly, right? What is the pacing between match after match after match and working in story in promos and in different kinds of stories too, where you might have a romance angle, and then you might have the feud between best friends who turned on each other in between in between two 20-minute matches that the guys are just going to tear the house down. So we're always thinking about pacing and when these things are gonna kind of fit in. And then in terms of delivering a side quest, I see a lot of similarities in what you're going to get from a wrestling promo. I'm always kind of talking to writers about like, hey, can you give me the briefing for this quest in the most succinct but effective way possible? You say the things that you need to say, but try not to mince words. And I think you'll see some interesting parallels with some of the best promos. And if you're looking to get into wrestling for the first time, that's some place I might start to, of just going and looking at some of the classic promos that have happened over the history of wrestling.
We might want to do a quick explanation of what a promo is.
Yes.
That's a good point.
I think, Samantha, do you have anything? I know, like, from Monolith, one of my favorite game promos were the intros in the Nemesis system when I run into a character there, and they basically drop a promo on me.
Oh,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, and those are designed to be as short as possible because you want to get right into the fight. So I think that's a really good example too.
Oh, the posture in those games too. Like they walk up and they like do like the full like wrestling like thing too.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you, I'm gonna beat you up, and then you're like, oh, I gotta fight this guy. This is gonna be.
Do
Well,
you
Good.
want
and
to quickly like ask Matt what like a promo in
Yes,
wrestling
I was gonna
means?
say.
Yes.
It's just talking smack, sort of establishing who you are, and like you guys just touched on, it's going to be a guy coming out and I'm going to kick your butt, and here's why, or here's why we have beef, or here's the problem, or whatever it could be. So just a quick or not so quick talking segment where you're advancing some sort of story.
The promos, it's often like it's not just an exposition either. Like it's an exposition, but it's also like just like a line of dialogue. A promo is like the most amorphous thing, you know, like in terms of what how it can be employed to like make something richer or set up a lot of like the stakes for a match too. It's really interesting. Like it's not just this is why we're gonna fight. It could just be you could do a promo in the middle of a match sometimes. It's rare, but it happens.
Yeah, I've seen it, and it is rare. And when it's rare, it's almost that much more effective, right? Because you haven't seen something like that before, which is another interesting parallel. Whenever we can do something in games that's new or catches the audience off guard, if the same things work in wrestling. And for me, the other half of like what I do in terms of like progression and gear, I think a wrestler is kind of made up in a loadout. I almost think of them the same way as I would equip a hero, of the things that make up this professional wrestler, whether it's their promos themselves, that's part of their core, it's part of their equipment, their entrance music, their ring gear, even their move set. Sometimes they might even have a companion or a manager, whether it's Kratos has Atreus, Hulk Hogan has Jimmy Hart, and they bring out the best.
I love that comparison.
And then the one last one I jotted down just before we started this was the idea of consumables, right? Like where in a game like Halo, I may have a limited number of grenades in a professional wrestling match. Certain wrestlers will have their core consumable, whether it's a bat with barbed wire around it, or the sledgehammer, or
spitting mist in someone's face.
Definitely a consumable.
And,
there's also that move that you can only do once or twice, otherwise it'll start to injure yourself.
It's on cooldown.
Yeah, it's on cooldown. You gotta get your star meter back up.
Or there's consumables around, like there's like tables, right? Like when a table is set up, right? It's just like, oh man, there's a table. And everyone's like thinking about the table the whole time. Like, oh man, they're going near the table. And it's just like, there's only one table. Or there's two. You're like, oh man, which table are they going through? And then if they go through both, you're like, what? They're going through both tables? Who's eating these tables? No, it's so true. Like the idea of consumables. I think like about like wrestling matches. Like as a multiplayer designer, I think about how wrestling matches are so rulesy in terms of like the opening of a match. It's like this is how like there are types of matches, right? There's I quit matches, which is a match that ends when one wrestler says I quit, usually from a move, like a couple of moves or a submission maneuver. Like someone gets into like an arm bar or something, and then like they can't take the pain anymore, and so they say I quit. There's ladder matches where like the title's up top, you have to climb the ladder and take it, right? There's a bunch of different kinds of matches, and I like how the matches have rules, but then the rules are broken, but how the rules are broken adds to like the fabric of the storytelling that goes on, which is great. Yeah. Like oftentimes there's like a last man standing match, which is like two people are like the whole goal is to put your opponent down so they can't stand for 10 seconds. And it's like, okay, this is good. I understand. This is a very readable rule. I understand what the stakes are here. But then like how that can be like how unexpected the resolution of that can be is like someone parks a forklift like over somebody else and they can't get up because like the forklift bars are like keeping them down. And it's like, okay, I did not see that coming, and that's hilarious, and I'm invested in this. Or it could be emotional, like like it's a very like it's a very like brutal match where it's like I like the two best friend angle is very classic, where it's like two best friends are going back and forth and trading blows, and then one of it, like, they both are gonna get counted out or something, and they hold on to each other to try and like keep each other lifted up so that the match doesn't end, so they can see who goes forward, right? Like, there's all these kind of rule bending and like ways to work around the rules in the course of a match that when I see that as a multiplayer designer, I'm like, oh, this is kind of tasty. This is kind of cool. Like, and it kind of makes you want to engage and design that too. It's like, oh, this is super readable. It's thematic, and the pacing is really good. And then the climax is like, excellent and inventive, which is kind of like all the things that we aspire to do in terms of like how we make products and stuff.
I love what you all have called out about like items being used to like build the match. I feel like a lot of that is really lost in video games, and we don't do a lot of it. The idea of there's a ladder somewhere around, and that it's going to be used, or if it's a ladder match in the first place, that at some point the ladder is going to come out, obviously, because it has to. Or there's a table somewhere set up, and at some point someone's going to do something with the stupid table, and you don't know how and what exactly is going to happen, but it builds so much of the tension, and it builds so much of expectation and being able to reverse and subvert those expectations. I feel like we don't do a lot of that in video games, and that's a missed opportunity.
It's like, imagine watching a like professional Smash match, and all of a sudden a hammer appears.
Or someone really just takes out of their back pocket, right? It's like for $1 million, and someone's like, "I got a Pokeball," and you're like, "What? He has an item!" I would lose my mind. I think that God of War 2018 does do that in a good way with how a specific item is handled. I don't know if it's like what the spoiler count is.
No spoilers.
Exactly. But God of War 2018 definitely does that a great deal, even with
props, like environment props too, I'd say.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
I think of Naughty Dog a lot when I think of these games, the Uncharted series in particular, and a particular fight in a restaurant where you're kind of fighting along there. The closer you get to someone, he's going to hit someone with a pan, and it creates the desperation of the match, and sells that idea that Drake can fight dirty if he needs to survive. And you see that smoke and gun, right? And it makes you want to kind of play through it again and see what might happen if you do things a little bit differently. But no, it's great stuff.
Yeah, so good. Consumables actually. I think you're right. I think consumables do. When I think of, I didn't actually think of that in an obvious way, but when items are introduced, they become like focal points. Even if they're not even used, they like really drag your eye somewhere, and you're kind of like, are they going to use it? When is it going to come back into effect? And
how and who's going to use it? And
I'd be lying if like every single time I'd see like in like the most recent era of watching Triple H wrestle, you're always looking for the sledgehammer. You're like, where's the sledgehammer? Is it here? Where's the sledgehammer coming from? Because it's like a thing that happens now. Yeah.
We'll use that when we plan matches too, because if there's going to be an introduction of a ladder, for example, I mean, obviously as an audience member, if a ladder comes out, it's like, whoa, a ladder, this is amazing. So you wouldn't want the bad guy, the heel, to bring the ladder out, because people are gonna be like, that's the coolest thing ever, and you're not trying to get people to cheer the quote-unquote bad guy. So that would be something that we even plan into the match, where it's like, oh, let's keep in mind that the face should be the one that introduces this ladder, because then they're going to get this reaction from the crowd of like, oh, the ladder is so cool, and the good guy got the ladder, like, we're so happy. And then an obvious thing right after that would have the heel cut them off, or that could be one of your cutoffs or something, or jump them, or there's the introduction of this ladder or chair, and this is so cool, and then right off the bat, like, oh, it gets dropped, and it's like, no, it's been introduced into the arena, so to speak, but it was not used yet. But yeah, now everyone's like sort of on the edge of their seat. So
Chekhov's ladder.
Yeah.
Right. So,
or get a second ladder. I've seen that too.
Right. And then we have to keep in mind, like was just sort of talked about, like once we set up a table, we have to be cognizant of, are people going to buy into finishes now? Like if I set up a table and then I hit you with the world's coolest move in the center of the ring, people almost know, like, well, it's not going to end because there's like this table that no one's
That's such a good point.
So you can't waste like quote unquote waste a cool move in the ring. So that's part of the planning too, where it's like, well, we can't set up the table at that point, because then no one's going to care about other things that we do until this table's sort of used, and that's another layer to all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I often think about like when like a face comes out and and takes a ladder out and sets it up. And my favorite things to do is the heel like cuts them off and then like packs it up and then puts it away. It's the best. You're just like, oh no, what's going on?
Yeah,
You
what a
also
great
say
way of
the player is
emphasizing these things.
invested in that table. Sorry, go ahead, Jenny.
Oh, that's it. I could. that's all good.
So you also brought up, Matt, that the wrestlers kind of have to keep in mind that audience participation is a thing, and to sort of, on occasion, respond to the audience and go with the flow, the audience's desires, so to speak. And I think that's something that we have to do in games a lot too, especially narrative design in like RPGs and branching games, where you have to sort of account for, the player might walk up to the quest giver and say, "You're a jerk," and then shoot him in the face. And like you have to sort of, it happens in Fallout, and they have to account for that.
No, absolutely. It's just video games. Only in video games, right?
Only in video games. And like
Video
you
games.
have
Just
you
the
have to account.
escalation.
Yeah, you have to account for that as a narrative designer and be like, okay, so if it's very unlikely that the player will shoot the quest giver in the face, but if they do, we have to plan for like how the quest can still advance, or any reactivity that might happen as a result of that. And I think that's a nice sort of crossover. Like it's really one of the only two, or a few of the only mediums that has to account for its audience becoming a part of the medium.
Yeah, it's
Do you
interesting.
have? Sorry, go ahead.
The first thing I thought about when Matt said that, in terms of like using the audience's influence, was playtesting, which is obviously so important for game development. And we are kind of almost at the player's whims in terms of like, if we think a feature is really great, we go in and playtest it, and everybody hates it. You can bet that feature is going to change.
Are there any like secret tricks or things that you keep in mind while you are in the ring to specifically react to the audience? Is there something you can talk to us about, Matt?
I kind of like what was just said there. There's like almost like we're doing like a real time play test, I suppose. So that's kind of cool. I mean, there's so many things, right? So if you are to chop somebody, slap them in the corner, and the audience loves it, perhaps they're all chanting "one more time, one more time." I mean, you can instantly play into that and be like, okay, because there is no like rigid thing that we have to follow when it's all unfolding again real time. So you're like, oh, everyone wants to see me hit him again, I will hit him again. And then people are like, woo, because then they get that immediate feedback and that payoff of like, they're aware, like, hey, we're involved in this. And I always talk about it. Like you could go to some kind of, I don't know, Bob Ross painting seminar or something back in the day and then be like, paint a tree. And he's not going to be like, what, a tree? I'll paint a tree. Like it's not interactive like that. I can't go to the ballet and be like, oh, the tertiary rule, do another tertiary. Like it's a performance that's already been.
Should though.
I know. Imagine if you could.
Imagine if you could.
Mm-hmm.
No, this is a business idea.
That would be amazing. But our thing is, so if I'm the bad guy and I hit the guy and everyone, they're just dying to see it again, they're all chanting one more time, you could easily, obviously, rear it up again, and then, nope, not going to do it because I'm the bad guy. And then, you instantly let every person in the building down, and now they hate you. And so there's just so many examples like that. You can play into those type of things.
Yeah,
Speaking more to the player investment kind of side, we've talked about props, we've talked about how to motivate the player through spaces. What about the characters? How is creating a compelling character for games similar to creating a compelling character for wrestling, for example? Samantha, I believe you have some special insight into character creation, either villains or heroes.
Yeah, so I think that wrestling does two things really, really well in terms of its character development. The first is creating heels or villains that people have met in real life or seen in real life, but it's really cartoonish caricature exaggerations of those. I think that games on occasion tend to fall into these sort of large catastrophic villain problems where the enemy is a bit faceless and it's this big like let's save the world because evil, and it's hard to sort of get into hating that kind of villain. Like you want the player to enjoy beating the villain, and I think wrestling does that really well because they come up with like, oh, it's that douchebag at the gym who like takes your weights and hoards them and sits on the bench and texts on his phone, except he's also got a a bat with spikes on it, and he's gonna try and beat up the hero. Like it's something that's familiar but taken to like 11, and I think that games can really benefit from that model a little more. Like I think Handsome Jack is a good example of that. And then the second thing is that characters are defined by their own personalities, but also by their relationships to other characters in wrestling. And people like to follow the feud between two wrestlers or the friendship between two wrestlers just as much as the wrestlers themselves. And I think that like games could benefit from emphasizing the relationship between characters or the relationship between an NPC and the player character more, because we have so little room to define a character in a game because there's so much else going on that you can do double duty and sort of define a character by their relationship to the other character.
Yeah. Rob, did you have something you were talking
Yeah,
about?
so talking about heels, one of the kind of just a prime example of wrestling and how they do this, Maxwell Jacob Freeman, MJF, is a wrestler in AEW, and he is in character 24/7. He is on Twitter whenever he is at fan meet and greets. He is an asshole, but so much more. Like he specifically will say things on Twitter like Dungeons and Dragons is for nerds. He specifically very much knows his audience and knows what he can do and say to evoke emotions of hatred in his audience and just get people to hate him and really feed and fuel off of that hate. And it turns him into this character that people want to see lose, that people will pay money to see lose. And it's more, his matches are more interesting to me than most video game villains. Most of the time in a video game, I want to win because it's winning. It's not just this guy who's an ass who I just want to beat.
Yeah, MJF does a really good job of really really getting you to dislike him, even if you're indifferent to the whole thing. Like he does a really good job, like of that. I think another part of it, besides the villain thing, is just like when you're creating a character that you're controlling as a player, right? Like for like character action games, I think about all the time. Like I think of like Dante at Devil May Cry a lot, where the opening cutscene in Devil May Cry, the very first one, kind of tells you exactly like everything you need to know about like this character's like to begin with. Is like they're like in this office, and how they answer the phone is they stomp their foot down on the ground, and they're so powerful that it pops the phone off of the thing, and he like answers it like that, and he's like laid back in like a recliner, and he's like, hey, yeah, what do you need? Like he's essentially like a Ghostbuster, and it's amazing, and he's just like, yeah, I'm a Ghostbuster, what do you need? Yeah, that's not enough money for me. And it's just like he clearly needs money, and he seems like this like he's this really confident, powerful character, and like how the next character who walks in like interacts with him is like she like throws her motorcycle at him, and then he's not fazed by it at all, and he's like really confident. But like that exudes down into his moveset. So the first time like this confidence and this power is communicated into how you first swing a sword with the character. And then how the character shoots, like it's all about this like very like their moveset and how they interact. Everything's all tied together in a one cohesive package. And it's not like he's like a very deep character, but you understand him. Like you can just get anybody to look at the character for the first 10 minutes of Devil May Cry and go, okay, I know who Dante from Devil May Cry is. And I think like going back to when we started talking about like the shine and the opening of a match, I think about that a lot. Of just like, how do I as a game developer, if I'm working on a game where I need to get a character over with the player, how do I do that in a very short amount of time? Like, how do I get them invested in that character, really understand that character? And I always kind of like look at wrestling where it's like, if I've never seen somebody, if I'm watching an indie show and I've never seen a wrestler before, but like they like their entrance comes out and then they like the opening of the match, I'm just like, who is this? Who is this person? This is rad, you know? And then like they have a full match, I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna remember that person. Like I will remember their name, I'll remember like their style, I can articulate that, I can hype them up to anybody else. And that's like super important, is like getting character over in a very bottled time, because matches are anywhere between like 30 seconds to like a half hour, right? But so like, but getting a character to really like show up and communicate who they are in that time and in that space, I think is something really huge in wrestling, that when it's done it really well, like I just want to like bottle that as a game developer and be like, all right, let me like get like that feeling of what you've done, so I can just use that in any game that I make to get players to really like a character.
Well, that reminds me of the character experience design in Final Fantasy 15, where you know they take into account mannerisms and idle animations and everything about a character that all sort of feeds back into their personality, so that you know who they are without them saying a word.
Yeah,
I think wrestling does it so well to, you know, use cliches in a way that makes people understand what a character is and what you want from them and how you can understand them within the context of other characters. I was wondering if I have a question for Matt.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm sure you have other things to say, but like,
Yeah.
you've been like called many different names in a ring apart from your actual name, which is Matt Cross. Like people have been chanting Silver Fox and whatever. Like, how does the audience influence your character?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they kind of give you ideas, right? Because there's been tons of times where the way someone just wrote my name or something that you can sort of embrace, and then so changes in your character can be organic, which is pretty awesome. Because you can come out and however people take to you, you can either fight that or embrace it, you know. So there are things that, and I think when it comes from the audience, people recognize it came from them, and then they're like, so they are more invested because they're like conscious of like, hey, we sort of did that, like it came from us, he embraced it. So there's that feeling, it permeates everything. That's really nice. I also want to say, which is kind of funny to me, so there's like a pseudo trick to what we're talking about here in wrestling, and it's like very not sexy. So you guys are talking about it like analytically, and oh, there's this and there's that, and I'm like, oh man, I hope I don't like blow the doors open with this. But often in wrestling, the bad guy will come out first, because it's so much easier to get someone to hate you than it is to get them to like you. So if I come out and I get right in your face and I flick you off, you're not going to like me. So by default, the next person who comes out is like, because the audience is like, well, we hate this first guy. He's a jerk. Bring out the next guy who's going to beat him up. So the next guy doesn't have to do anything except for appear. I'm here, and it will be assumed he's the guy that's going to beat him up. We love him. So you do a lot. Like, and now I don't know if that like crumbles these walls or something, but like, you know, it's there are certain people that we're not going to like, even if they do the right things. And it's difficult to get people to like you. You might, again, on paper, do all the right things and say all the right things, and people still might be like, I don't know, something about him, don't like him. Whereas if I get in somebody's face and I'm like, you suck, they're like, I don't like him. It's just easier. So the way we exploit that, if you will, is have the bad guy come out first, be a jerk to everyone, and then again, sort of by default, the next guy who comes out, it's just, everyone's aware of this like eternal fight of good and evils from every story we've ever been told from the day we're born. So as soon as the second guy comes out, it's like, this must be the savior that's going to beat the first guy up. Woo!
That's a fascinating bit of psychology that I think could definitely translate to games.
I've never felt so seen the way that he just like the bad guy comes out, says something bad, and then I'm upset. I'm like, I am upset. I am very upset.
It's like it almost bugged. I was like, I don't even want to say this because I'm sure
No, say it. We want it all.
it's
Yeah.
like effective, and I'm like, oh no. Like,
No,
I
it's so
don't really-
true. It's so
Mhm.
simple, right? Like I think like in game development, we always talk about like, hey, how did you get this thing to feel so good? And and it's often like you expect this very like in-depth like nuanced thing. It's just like I just like subtly rotate the camera and like mess with the FOV every single time the player pulls the trigger, and that's how that gun feels so good to shoot. It's like, really? That's it? Yeah, it's not this like really complicated thing. I just do these little two things, and yeah, the rumble might be complicated, but it's not that big of a deal. And everyone's like, oh my god, it feels so good though, right? Or it's like the animation is really good. Like there's all this like game feel stuff. So the fact that you were just like, oh yeah, well the bad guy comes out first, I was like, oh, it's so true. It's so simple.
Everything makes sense.
It's almost necessary sometimes too. I think one of my favorite guys of all time, Ravishing Rick Rude, right? If the baby face was out first and Rick Rude's in the ring calling the audience a bunch of sweat hogs, you'd expect a baby face to do something about that, right? But if he's not out yet, there's no blame that can be assigned yet.
Good point.
And some people just have a really punchable face. MJF, you look at him, you just want to punch him in the face.
He's very confident though.
Mhm.
Very confident man. That diamond ring, he's very sure of himself in that diamond ring.
So
Jenny,
in
you
the
had-
next
that's-
10 minutes. Oh, I'm sorry.
No. You're
Let's move on.
the voice of reason.
Oh, I don't know about that. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to kind of go through a lightning round set of questions that we sourced from social media with you guys. The first one is, if I wanted to get into professional wrestling, what are some things I should watch? Where should I start? And what are your personal recommendations?
You should go to an indie wrestling show with Andrew or me.
when it is safe to do
second that.
so.
Yeah. I would say going to a wrestling show in person is really magical.
Mm.
It is very magical. I think
I wish I
supporting.
could go back to my first time.
I know.
Exactly.
In the COVID era, it's been very sad because there's not a lot of wrestling shows happening. But when we all triumph over this this year, and then everything gets better and hopefully goes back to normal, we will. I would say go to an indie show. Local indie show is absolutely great. I think from there, I mean, there's obviously like WWE is has a lot of access through their network and stuff. They're on Mondays, AEW's on Wednesday nights. I would say, just watching a wrestling show, just going in and just watching it blind is the best way to go into it. Lucha Underground's also fantastic for wonderful storylines. They were shot like movies, which is great.
Can someone
yeah.
remind us where to watch Lucha Underground? Because I forgot already.
Tubi TV. TUBI TV has the rights to Lucha Underground. You can watch it all for free.
Oh, it's wonderful.
There you go. That's if you can't go to an indie show right now, it's probably the easiest way to see the storytelling aspect. It's probably one of the best ones. Also, Matt is in it.
Hey.
Hey.
But nothing beats going to a show in person. Nothing. Just go.
Yeah, ITV also has a ton of independent promotion libraries as well. I think a bunch of independent promotions like Progress have their own video on demand service too. So I would just Google indie wrestling and kind of go through there, or just research some really good wrestlers that you've heard about.
When you have a local indie promotion, they are everywhere. You have one, you just have to look for it.
Do it. Very cool. Thank you, everyone. Next question. What video game hero or villain do you think would make an excellent professional wrestler?
Goro Majima from the Yakuza series is pretty much already a professional wrestler in the context of a video game. You just need to pop him in a ring and you are all set to go.
I think we all have the same answer on this.
That's why I spoke so fast.
I do kind of feel like Sans from Undertale and Orange Cassidy are the same person.
Okay.
Ooh.
'Cause you've got Sans who just kind of stands around wisecracking with his hands in his pockets until you finally fight him. And then he just goes ham.
I had like a different answer, but now like I think the consumables conversation really got in my head and like the prop thing. I want to see Shovel Knight as a wrestler immediately. A person coming out as a knight with a shovel that's gilded and golden. That's it. That's it. That's all I need to know. That's all I need to know. Like I'm in the crowd. I'm seeing this. Who is this? A knight with a shovel. I'm in. Like I don't need to know
I'd be down
else.
for someone with a shovel.
Yeah.
See, it's like it's so easy.
It's
and
so
the rest
easy.
the rest writes itself. It's good.
That is like an interesting point to me because like I'll teach in my seminars and things like that, that the only time that you can guarantee that the audience is looking at you, especially nowadays with cell phones and all these distractions, is when you make your entrance. You've got about 3 to 4 seconds when you know everyone in the building. It's human nature, right? Some kind of music plays, there's a fog machine, and people are like, I wonder what's going to come out. And spoiler alert, it's always a male or female, who cares? But it's human nature to be like, I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking of that because I'm like, if it's a golden knight on a horse or something, you would be like, this is immediately cool. It's already cool.
Yeah. Like
I would freak out if it was a horse.
Yeah, but it could just be a little horse, like on a those horse head on a stick, and then like in a knight with a shovel holding it. The merch would fly out of the room. I would like buy everything.
Like he's on a horse. He's got armor.
Yeah.
Why didn't he have a shovel? Yeah, but totally.
Okay, I want this so bad right now. I miss wrestling so much. Definitely.
Wrestling's the best.
All right, last question. What's one thing that wrestling does right that games can learn from?
So many things, though.
I have kind of a weird answer.
Go
Go.
for it.
So I think that something that wrestling does really well is playing with gender stereotypes and the fluidity of gender and sexuality. I like there are so many times where, you know, 2 male wrestlers will power each other up by kissing, or, you know, an entire wrestling match is about one wrestler trying to touch the other one's butt. And
There's
like,
100% more kissing in wrestling than you ever thought there would be.
so much kissing, and like the audience is like going crazy. They're so into it. They're excited. Like there's so much more just playing with stereotypes and breaking stereotypes and just sort of breaking down that wall and bringing everyone together and saying like, all of this is great and okay and fun, and everyone should just enjoy it. And I think that games need to embrace that so much more.
I think I would like to see a less rigid idea of storylines and characters. Like sometimes, you know, we are creative, so when we write our heroes and our villains, they are really as like so set in stone. Instead of like thinking about what could develop over time and what could develop, especially in like games as a service, what could develop over time based on who the audience likes and why. I'm not advocating for, you know, developing a game together with players, but there's like something to be said about how a player community can shape your stories to be better and more interesting, the same way as, you know, wrestling characters are shaped by their audience.
More
Especially a
heel
live
turns.
service game.
More heel turns in live service games.
Hell yeah.
Just more heel turns in general in video games. Just
Yeah.
in general. Like I really like I think that games, we often don't take the, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but the obvious fruit, like the things that are like the most tasty. I think we kind of like, we get too clever sometimes for our own good, where versus like there are some things we know that are really tried and true and good, and if we can just do, and I think the execution is where it comes into it. I think wrestling does a fantastic job of possibly telling you an identical story 5 times in one night, like in terms of like identical kind of story, but there's what happens in the execution leads to so many different outcomes and feelings in the whole thing, right? And I think wrestling, that's something that we have to get as flexible as wrestling does, where like Matt, you're talking about how like sometimes like some things aren't planned, and just like as they listen to the crowd and just kind of doing something, going on a limb and being like, okay, we're gonna change directions in this part of the match. But still, I think that is kind of the beauty of it. It's just like the story you went in is just like, you're still gonna tell the story you want to kind of do, but it could, those details could fundamentally change how an audience member could like articulate the like what happens in a match. And I think that is something I would like to see games do more, is like at least like really kind of like be willing to take something that's tried and true, but then find details to kind of really make powerful differences. I think is something that we gotta get better at.
Yeah, I'd love to see games have more stipulation matches, especially in esports contexts.
Oh,
where
tell me
because
about it.
when you have stipulation matches, when you have something like, oh, it's a hardcore match or it's a 3v3 tag match, you kind of play with different affordances and get to see people, you get to see different qualities of teams and players shine. And there's something about kind of esports that for me, like watching the same teams play the same game over and over, it kind of starts to get stale. But when you add in those special things that really feel interesting, they feel different, it makes things worth watching and worth tuning into for that excitement.
Want to close us out, Anthony? Any thoughts?
Well said. I can't follow all that up. I want to see all.
Works for me. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for watching this panel. Thanks to all the participants. Thank you, Matt Cross, for joining us for this panel. We really appreciate your time. Hey, audience, holler at us on Twitter if you have any additional questions from this panel, how you can get into wrestling, specifics on game design and wrestling, things like that. Feel free to reach out. We are more than happy to talk about this at length, to the point where you will be sick of us. Thanks again to PAX for having us, and we will see you online.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yay! Oh, we did it.